Welcome, and thanks for tuning in to this third broadcast in our EY Oceania LinkedIn Live series, Transformational Change, and we're coming to you live. Throughout this conversation, please join in by adding your questions into the chat pane, and some of these will be put to the panel at the end of the session. Now, so far, we've looked at economics and ethics, wellbeing and culture, and today we're focused on how COVID-19 has changed the way that we think about work forever. Many of us have been talking about the future of work for some time, but we saw that become a concrete reality pretty much overnight as millions of people pivoted to work from home. And now every business around the globe is thinking about how to ensure continuity and support their people and customers through this crisis. But it's not just about solving the challenges of now. We also need to consider next how we ease out of it and reimagine beyond to the new normal that will emerge. Now, in the face of complex change, the way that we think about work needs to shift towards resilience, or being able to quickly recover from these extraordinarily difficult conditions. Our observations suggest that resilient working results from the chemistry of workforce combining with workplace and work smart by design. Now, this is a time and opportunity for us to embrace this work frame, to equip us to lead in this new normal. We may even find that resilience is what becomes our new measure of success. So, over the next half hour, I'm going to be joined by two guests, Selina Short, who's the EY Oceania Leader of Real Estate, Hospitality and Construction, and Justin Greig, EY's Oceania's Advisory Leader. So once again, welcome to episode 3 of the EY Oceania LinkedIn Live series, Transformational Change. Now, Selina, I want to start with you and focus in on workplace. I know you have some interesting insights into not just the bricks and mortar of this equation, but the importance of transformative placemaking, or creating connected places where people can do their best work safely. Welcome. You've always had a strong belief that the real estate sector can make people's lives better, solve human dilemmas. How has this played out during COVID-19? I think we've got some technical difficulties, Selina. Can you hear me? I might, this is the beauty of...
Hi, Jenelle. I'm not sure if you can hear me. A few technical details.
You know we're live now when that happens. Off you go, Selina. Okay, so I think we are having challenges with Selina's feed. Perhaps what I'll do while we're working to get Selina back up is turn to Justin. Justin, whilst I've got you online here, we might turn our attention to working smart. Justin, can you hear me? I'll just check our feed.
Jenelle, yes, I can hear you fine.
All right, Justin, I'm going to go to you. We might turn our attention to working smart. Perhaps we'll start with the question of, with our teams in lockdown, what have we been seeing around productivity and working from home?
Janelle, I think I'll start with an EY perspective first. So in our teams, we've seen actually surprised ourselves with really big increases in productivity. Our people are reporting fewer distractions, better focus, and rapidly growing confidence with our digital collaboration tools. And look, perhaps that's not unexpected for a consulting workforce, given that their lives are about shifting from project to project and working across client sites. But interestingly, the productivity lift is also reported by most of our clients, and that's across financial services, public sector, real estate, technology, telco, etc. And we think the contributing factors are varied. Over and above the obvious things like no lost time from commuting, almost all believe that the crisis has broken down silos and enabled rapid, more enterprise-wide decision-making, a focus on working for the communal good rather than clinging to established ways of working. And that's sort of manifested in receptiveness to new ways of rostering, more flexibility in the workday. And many of our clients are saying that they've had about 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. I think the big challenge now is how do we hold on to these gains as we move out of the lockdown phase?
Indeed, that is quite the challenge and also the opportunity, Justin. So working smart is about working more effectively and efficiently. And I've heard you say in the past that it's about focusing our innovation at the point where humans and technology meet. What does that then mean for our next steps?
Yeah, look, this is really interesting. Hey, if we think about sort of how we've worked smart during the lockdown phase, it's really been an adrenaline-fueled scramble to adopt digital technologies. I mean, the big innovation during the lockdown phase is simply to find new ways to continue working. The simple fact of connecting and being able to continue with our work despite being all physically apart. As we move progressively out of the lockdown phase, we're going to need to cater for an even greater challenge, the challenge of a mostly at home, partially at work workforce. You know, running virtual meetings when everyone is locked down, we'll look back on as being comparatively easy. But what about when 20% of your people are in the office, 10% are still commuting because you have new shift patterns, 10% are at a customer site, and maybe the rest are working from home or a third space like a coffee shop as they start to open up again. A totally different challenge for the mindset of how you run your business, including all of your people. We think that many of the answers are going to come to these sorts of questions are going to come from continued agile adoption of more consciously designed digital working processes, and also being very thoughtful about how to use the data trails that are being generated at a far greater rate than ever before to optimize the way we work using workforce analytics. There's, of course, also this priority that sort of in an environment that is depressed and has sort of high unemployment and a downturn, that we do lock in the silver linings that we've discovered so far. Many businesses have had a return to the basics with better cash flow disciplines, challenging and reducing discretionary spend, and most importantly, challenging the power of silos. I call this taking a zero-based mindset to reevaluating your operating model and how you work. Really challenging yourselves as to sort of why you perhaps have worked in silos in the past should be really front of mind as we move into this next phase. We need to not slip back into unnecessarily complex and costly old ways of working. I think, really our first responses to COVID were of necessity reactive. We turned our business around in 3 days. I'm sure everyone's had the same kind of crisis experience that we've had. But our next steps need to be more considered, more proactive. We need to lock in the smarter ways of working by design.
Thanks, Justin. I used the terminology in the beginning around now, next, and beyond timeframes. So beyond that very immediate and very obvious return to workforce or workplace planning, what else should be on our Work Smart agenda?
Well, look, beyond COVID, we need to design our work smart processes to be resilient. Can't work from office A, doesn't matter. Supplier B can't supply, doesn't matter. Geopolitical stoush with trading partner C, well, the show's got to go on. Customer preferences changing, well, you already knew that. But how do you do all of that without laying in great costs? We've been studying some of the world's most transformative businesses before COVID and during the COVID crisis to find the elements that enable them to stay ahead of change. Now, this is a long conversation, but I'll offer sort of four key lenses to think about today that I think are immediately useful for everybody. The first is to focus on what you value as an organization and a business, and also how you create value for your customers. Rely on your supply networks for the rest, not your supply chains. Very careful, considered choice of word here. Supply chains are as strong as the weakest link. You've got to cultivate supply networks, so networks that are resilient. And to do that in a cost-effective way, you've got to have a deep understanding of the costs of risk in your particular business and your particular supply network. But that focus on value is a very important first step. The second thing to think about how you move beyond COVID is really to put humans at the center of your strategic thinking. You need to adapt your businesses and organizations at least as fast as your customer needs change. and your employees need to work as teams to deliver on your target customer experience. So that human at the center thinking is not a soft side element. It's a very strategic part of your thinking around how you move beyond COVID. The third thing is to really get serious about building the capabilities to deploy technology at speed. The digital and human worlds are so intertwined now as to be really inseparable. You must be able to reach your customers and your employees with seamless digital experiences wherever they physically are. Customer expectations change fast, and your technology capabilities need to be able to move as fast. But you really need to be able to go live with new technology every single day. And for many, that's a challenge. And then the fourth thing that I think should frame your planning as to how you move beyond COVID is you need to think about how you can innovate at scale. So data, digital connections, good intentions, these all achieve nothing unless those insights are converted to actions that either drive new and better ways of servicing your customers or new and better ways of working, or preferably both. Siloed innovations, experiments that don't drive improved customer experience or better workforce engagement just won't cut it. That's why innovation needs to be scaled, and why we've been talking about the end of silos, and really applying that team of teams mindset across your whole business and your supplier networks.
Thanks, Justin. And for anyone who's just joined, we're live. We're discussing workplace resilience in the now, next and beyond of COVID-19. And we're looking at whether reopening your workplace can help you reimagine the future. Please do add your questions in the chat field, like I said earlier, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. Selina, I think you're back.
I'm back.
on agile delivery here. Glad I can see you, glad I can hear you. So I'm going to repeat the question I threw to you before. Like I said, you've always had a strong belief that the real estate sector can make people's lives better. How are you seeing this play out during COVID-19?
Yeah, thanks, Jenelle. And look, I think it's great to actually be part of this conference now. Always can depend on the technology to throw us a little curveball, and that's certainly something we've been dealing with through this crisis. I think as you talk about that intersection between people and place is absolutely vitally important, and that's something that I've always strongly believed. And we've really seen that played out hugely during this COVID crisis. Both the lockdown and the social distancing has completely disrupted the natural ways that we've all come together, whether that's in parks, restaurants, shopping centres, schools, and of course offices and the places we work. It's had an absolutely huge impact, and we've all lived and experienced that in a really different way. I think we all know that humans are fundamentally social animals, and this unplanned experiment has really made us miss, I think, and appreciate even more so that aspect of our lives. Many of us can't wait to get back and re-engage in all of those places that have been absent from our lives over this period. And so there's that desire to rush back, and we've seen that with the loosening of restrictions. However, I do think it is really important that we pause and we think about this 1 in 100-year opportunity we've actually been handed to fundamentally change the way we think and look at that intersection of people and place and refocus on how we want to live and work and play in that intersection of space.
Oh, I think that's very true. But similarly, Selina, at this time, there's also going to be a real temptation for many to say, well, you know, with all this remote working, let's just leave the bulk of our workforce at home and we can take 25% right out of our real estate costs. But what do you think organisations should be doing before they put that red line through that cost line item?
Yeah, look, Jenelle, great question, and it's certainly one that's been dominating many headlines. And if you're going to be controversial, why not just cut all real estate costs? I think on the whole, what we've seen in the organisations we're talking to, many organisations have moved really well to this work from home. We've seen productivity maintained and even increased. We've seen the democratisation of the way teams come together. So previously you may have had a bulk of your team in Sydney and a few poor souls trying to chip in at the right moment on teleconference. And this format where we're all able to participate through the same platform has created different team dynamics. What we've seen is, as you say, the cost-cutting potential, the different ways we interact has firmly put real estate on the CEO agenda. We have seen CEOs talk about how their people have worked effectively from kitchen benches, which I'm doing this morning. Didn't work so effectively initially, but we're wondering if we're ever going to need that much office space again. However, I think this is an oversimplified storyline. It's been a great one for the news headlines, but I think we need to take a deeper look. Office, for sure, is an expensive line item in your cost ledger, and it's one that deserves some focus. However, it's not as simple as remote working equals less office space. Firstly, what we're going to see is over the last decade, we've really seen offices be designed as these productivity powerhouses that prioritise social interaction. And because they've been designed that way, what we've found out is they actually don't work that well in a global pandemic. For most of the optimised offices, we know now that you can fit maximum of 20 to 30% of your people back in the office if you as you need to comply with social distancing rules. So when you look at the dynamics in our big cities, Sydney and Melbourne, office vacancies were only at about 4% prior, earlier on in the year. Factor in the length of lease terms, we're not going to suddenly see, oversupply of office space. However, before office owners breathe a collective sigh of relief, longer term there is going to be fundamental disruption in the way we use space. As you've prefaced, we need to think across these 3 time horizons, and I think people really need to now start to get their head into that beyond phase. There are deep structural changes here afoot in how we're going to work in the intersection of place. And we're going to really need to reshape how we think about workplace. We know from research coming back that people are struggling with certain elements of working home. They're missing the ability to crowd round a whiteboard and, work on a new operating model. They're missing the ability to just learn by osmosis. People that may not be in your direct team, but you learn from by just being in proximity to them. And they've missed the social side. We know that fundamentally people crave that social connection, and work has been a really important part of that social fabric. So how do we deal with the real estate cost line? And if you just rush to that, you're going to miss the point completely. We need to think about this once in a 100-year event as a springboard, really, to think about what resilient working means and to really look at the interrelationship between people and place, wherever that place may be, and how we really use this opportunity to actually change the game. But if I could be cheeky, Jenelle, to throw a question back to the moderator, you and I have known each other for a long time, and fundamentally the basis of all of this is behaviour change and change management. And you've spent your career focused on this from, working with inmates in jails through to major corporate transformation. No one knows more about this than you, and I'd really love to draw your insights into the conversation in terms of what you're seeing about the EY experience around this.
That is cheeky. Not only have you dropped off the screen and left me on it for a while by myself, you've then thrown a question to me. Thanks, Selina. Look, the research has certainly been really enlightening for us. We had 6,500 of our people from across Australia and New Zealand respond to the survey, and it tapped into a number of areas, and that included how people want to work. And what we saw was a real recognition of the nature of work that could possibly be better delivered from home. So work that requires focus and concentration, things like analysis or reviewing or report writing. But there was also work that really lent itself to the office. And you've talked about that social interaction, but work which requires that collaboration, that requires client interactions, where you need to give feedback and you need to give coaching. And, typically when I think about change, I'd say you need to shift mindset to change behaviour. But this has been a really interesting time where the behaviour change has been forced upon us, and now we're seeing the mindsets shift afterwards. So, for example, we had to shift our behaviour to work remotely, and that was regardless of what we believed about it. I've seen many teams now realise how much more inclusive it actually feels, particularly when you think about the smaller satellite offices or our offshore teams, or staff that would typically be at client site and aren't able to get back to the office. And interestingly, we saw only 11% of our workforce actually wanted to come back in that first wave. And I think that in no small part has been the realisation that the playing field has been levelled, and suddenly everyone's in the same boat, and people who historically felt like they were on the outer feel like every other person on the team now, and it's a shared experience. And so with that has come a mindset shift that technology can be used to drive greater inclusion and greater team cohesion. And that's not words that we would typically have used before. But again, that forced change has allowed us to see that, and the mindset's shifted with it. So Justin, we've got you back into the frame now, which is great. And I'm keen to direct some questions to the both of you. Selina, big question for you is what do you think will be lost if organisations can't achieve the juggling that's required to embrace resilient working now and beyond?
Jenelle, I think they'll miss a massive opportunity. I think if we come at this with silo mentality of just thinking about your patch, we're going to miss the opportunity that's been afforded to us to fundamentally break down those silos, bring that whole of organisation thinking, but also more collectively and more broadly than that. I think if we can connect up those dots within your organisation, but also with other organisations that are dealing with these opportunities as well, I think you have the chance to completely reframe the future of your business.
Great. Thanks, Selina. And Justin, in terms of hybrid working, what opportunities do you see organisations having available to them now that they can tap into?
Jenelle, I think we've got a great opportunity to look at sort of some folks that are already setting the pace in the space. So to follow the COVID innovators and also the digital innovators. So, COVID innovators, if you in your business haven't run a management team virtually, talk to someone who has. If you're looking to bring 600 of your people together for to solve some difficult problems for a stretch of hours, lean into those folks that have been running big collaborative design events. You need to project manage field workers and head office workers in a very dispersed environment, and you haven't done it before. Well, the good news is many have. So there are lots of good practices that have already been proven before COVID and tested during COVID that give us a nice strong sort of roadmap to move forward in. And to those that are sort of further down the track in terms of their thinking, you should look into how the pioneers of digital transformation have really started to sort of create great business value. I think of remote control rooms optimizing operations in mines in the Pilbara, or digital coordination centers coordinating field work across hundreds of thousands of square kilometers in some of our utilities. Or even very interesting work that is being proven now around using digital twinning to create a digital twin of a supply chain or assets in a supply chain to help to optimize them and sort of predict points of failure and building that resilience. So there's a huge amount of things now that might have sounded pre-COVID like being things that maybe were optional or could be dealt with later. But I think the great gift that COVID's given us is it's brought digital technology as a lived experience into the boardroom, and it should position our CEOs and executive teams to be more adventurous in using in adopting technologies and ways for working that are actually already proven are comparatively low risk but enormously high value.
Thank you, Justin. I think there's some great perspectives, and it does bring huge opportunity. We've got a whole lot of questions coming in from our audience, which is great to see. I'll direct one to you, Selina, and forgive me for squinting into this. Will commercial real estate have to pivot and convert spaces to residential?
Look, that's certainly an option, Jenelle, if we end up with sort of an oversupply of office space, that we've seen that happen before, where office buildings have been converted into residential. So that's definitely one of the opportunities for excess space, if that's what arrives. I don't think that's going to be on the cards anytime in the near future. I just think the need for all the space we can get for social distancing. Our colleague I was speaking to in the US today said they were having requests for more space so they could get people in. But that's absolutely an option that we can go to.
Great. I've got a question here. Perhaps I'll throw it to you, Justin, in the first instance. One question is, how can remote workers be more productive and engaged, and how can teams be led successfully remotely? Perhaps we can all weigh in, but I'll start with you, Justin.
Yeah, thanks. So look, I think the great thing about this COVID experience for all of us is we're realizing that people are people that connect better when we make the commitment to connect. We're also very visual creatures, so it's quite helpful to use our digital collaboration technologies, much like we're doing today, to talk to each other. And interestingly enough, we're finding that sort of in, at least in our teams, that sort of lots of the people that sort of ordinarily might have been left in the background are reporting that they feel more included, more heard, and more seen. That the sorts of meetings that they're having, although they're in the context of longer days, tend to be deeper and more personally engaging. And lots of our folks are reporting more one-on-one time with their managers. In fact, one of our partners, Microsoft, reported from a study that they had done based on sort of deploying their own workforce analytics, that they noticed that there were more interactions between managers and their team members, but the meeting durations had started to shrink quite significantly, I think, to accommodate with the fact that digital technologies are great, but they are quite demanding. You know, they pull you in, and there's less opportunity when you're looking at someone on the screen to be doing something else. So I think kind of that, all of those give great opportunities to your question, Jenelle, as to sort of how we can actually create and sustain engagement. I am quite a strong believer, though, in Selina's point of view, that serendipity of in-person interactions is also very important. That's a little more difficult to create digitally. And I think that we're going to have to sort of think about how we manage a hybrid model effectively.
Thank you. And Selina, did you have any perspectives to share on that?
I think, another really important consideration to think through is also the opportunities that this opens up. So if we dislocate the office, going to a CBD office with a certain employment opportunity, we're going to open up a much more diverse potential. So to people that are located in regional Australia, to people that need to work closer to home because of caring responsibilities, to people with a disability, if it doesn't require coming into CBD offices anymore to do this kind of work, which we've successfully proved out, it opens up a different potential of opportunities around sort of diversity and bringing that different thinking to the table, which I think is another real potential coming out of this.
I think so too. And I think you've inadvertently touched on one of the other questions that's come up, Selina, which is what do we think this is going to do for recruitment? And certainly to mine, I think that what it does has smashed some of those barriers that have existed in the past in the realms of, who the talent pool is that we can draw from. So now if we're talking about removing barriers around proximity to CBD or overseas talent that you might be able to tap into, or offshore alliances, etc. I see that as more available to us now than ever before. There's a question around induction and how we might drive that. I do think we need to rethink how we might be able to extend the reach. We've done a great job, I think, of connecting with people who already exist in the organisation in this kind of hybrid virtual ways you've talked about, Justin. But the challenge is new people coming in, and how do they feel connected in the same way that they might not have if they don't have the same access. There's also a question that's come in around whether or not we think that this will be a long-term or permanent transformation in work culture. And conscious of time here, what I will say is I think that's ours to define. Those organisations who are conscious about what has worked in this period of time, what hasn't worked in this period of time, and then try to codify that into their way of operating and taking it forward, you then have taken the opportunity to really embed that as a long-term evolution of culture. Those who maybe don't name it, don't think about how to systematise it, perhaps this was just a bubble of a point in time and you go back to the way it was. And to my way of thinking, that would be a bit of a loss of an opportunity, as we've talked about, as you said, Selina, this once in 100-year kind of change that's come along. So We're at time. I'd like to wrap by perhaps one question each, a better question, Selina and Justin, that you'd like to leave the audience with to take away and ponder. I'll start with you, Justin.
Okay, well, look, my challenge, my question would be ask yourself, how can I continue to move up the digital maturity curve? It's not consulting speak. We're all living now sort of the importance of intertwining our digital and physical lives. Do that by design rather than by chance, and ask yourself how you can do that.
And Selina?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, Jenelle, my question would be, how do we recreate that synchronicity of the water cooler, that casual conversation, that learning by osmosis? How do we now create this in this work from home and what will become a hybrid work environment as we move forward?
Love it. So perhaps together we'll leave you to ponder those questions, and can reopening your workplace help you reimagine your future? Thank you for joining us. Next time we'll have 2 more guests to discuss another aspect of this extreme challenge. So make sure you're following EY's LinkedIn page for updates on date and time. If you want to hear more on resilient working or delve deeper into some thought leadership we've developed around this area, please drop us a note in the comments box. We'll keep monitoring those, or connect with us directly via LinkedIn. You can also access the EY website, which features rolling commentary on COVID-19, the latest changes and analysis covering a whole range of related business issues. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.